Hello guys. Aaron Recap here. Today I'm gonna show you about a South Korean zombie film called Alive. Spoilers ahead. The protagonist of this story is Jun-woo, who is a live streamer and a gamer. He wakes up in his family's apartment alone, and sees his mother left a note for him to buy more groceries, because there's little amount of food left in Jun-woo's pantry. But Jun-woo ignores it and starts streaming his games, but his game was soon interrupted by some of his teammates, because of something they saw on live news. They curiously inform other teammates to see what's happening on news. He hears a large crashing sound and people screaming loudly. On TV he sees reportings about assaults and violent behaviors of humans. As sound getting from the outside becomes too noisy, he goes to his balcony to check what's happening. He was shocked to see a large group of people running insanely, biting each other and grooving each other violently. As he hears a large bang noise on his door from the hallway, Jun-woo checks it, and curiously opens the door. A man covered in blood suddenly bursts into his apartment, introducing him as his neighbor. Jun-woo asks him to leave, but he begs to stay in a hurry. Jun-woo grabs a knife from the kitchen quickly. The man begs Jun-woo to let him stay in his apartment. Suddenly the man's eyes turns blood red, indicating Jun-woo that he's infected. He starts to growl and attacks Jun-woo. Jun-woo pushes him out of the door and sees another infected devouring him. Jun-woo blocks the door with his refrigerator. He checks his phone and sees received messages from his mother, but he couldn't text or call her back as his reception has gone down. He starts to divide his remaining food in the pantry to hold out the next several days. Soon realizes there's not much left. Next day he learns further from the news that infected shows cannibalism and the infection rapidly transmit from contact of blood, bites, scratches or stab wounds, and should be avoided at any cost. He curiously checks his social media and sees a lot of people on social media uploading their whereabouts seeking help from authorities. Jun-woo too uploads a photo of his and his location on social media, hoping someone might help him. He also sees a live streamer falling to his death while trying to get his phone reception back. Jun then tries to get his phone reception back by attaching it to a drone and trying to fly it over his apartment, but this idea fails as his drone runs out of battery. That night Jun-woo sees a police officer running off the streets trying to fight off infected cannibals who are trying to devour her. Jun-woo gets agitated and starts calling out the police officer to help, but Jun-woo is also helpless at this state. He witnesses the police officer getting eaten by cannibals alive. Hearing his shoutings, an infected tries to open his barricaded door. As Jun checks, he realized the infected managed to make it in. Jun tries to push the infected back, but he wasn't able to go against cannibal's strength. Infected cannibal starts chasing Jun-woo, but Jun-woo climbs out the balcony, tracking the infected. He blindly chases him at fall from the edge of his balcony to his death. Few days passes by and he starts drinking liquor to keep himself hydrated. Soon he realized that his water line is cut off and now he has no food or water in the apartment. Weeks passed and Jun-woo dances around his apartment intoxicated by liquor and hallucinates about seeing his family coming back. He hugs his mom happily, then snaps out of delusions and starts to break down angry and disappointed. He later tries to get his reception back by placing it on a selfie stick and extending it out of the balcony. He reaches out as possible, risking his life, and successfully receives a voice message from his family. Jun learns that his father, mother and sister is hiding together in his father's office. Jun-woo was distressed to hear his mother's voice over, slowly turning into a screaming and loud sobbing. He bawls his eyes out as he listens to his family getting eaten up alive by the infected. Agitated and enraged, Jun grabs a golf club and storms out to the hallway, which is full of infected. In rage he curses and he starts beating and smashing the head off of many infected as possible. The commotion attracted huge number of infected running towards him, to engulf him alive. He recovers from his rampage and realized he needed to get back to his apartment to save himself from the infected. He moves around the hallway quietly and sneaks into his apartment safely from narrowly escaping the infected. 20th day goes by, and John sees the power station blowing up from the distance. Having no power, water, his beloved family or no sign of help, he loses faith in life. Then John Woo reluctantly decides to end his life. He makes a noose from wires and hangs himself in the living room. As he chokes himself, he sees a laser light shining at him from an apartment opposite to his. He swiftly tries to untie himself off the noose. He frees himself and falls on the floor. He gets to the balcony and sees a woman looking at him through binoculars. Happiness beyond belief to see a non-infected human being. He starts to wave at her and she waves back. She just saved John Woo from attempting to kill himself. Agreeing to meet next day, they both goes to sleep. At night, girl from the opposite apartment hears loud noise from her hallway and prepares to activate an improvised trap made by her. Next morning, John wakes up looking for her. They introduce themselves through their mobile devices. But their conversation gets interrupted when an infected cannibal enters Yoon Bin's apartment, but the infected get caught in Yoon Bin's trap. She quickly kills the cannibal with an axe. Days passed by. John Woo and Yoon Bin collects rainwater to drink and clean themselves. Observing from the binoculars, Yoon Bin find out that the 8th floor of the John Woo's apartment complex is free of infected cannibals. One day Yoon Bin sees John Woo struggling in hunger, and tries to throw a rope across John's apartment to send some food through the rope. The attempt failed and falls into the street, where a mass number of infected stroll headlessly. John sees this and quickly grabs his drone and flies a rope to Yoon Bin's apartment. Using this connection, Yoo sends John some food. He thanks her and gobbles the food in a hurry and sees an infected fireman climbing to Yoo's apartment using the fallen rope, and warns her about it in a hurry. Just then the fireman pulls the rope. The table which the rope attached to flies across the room, knocking Yoon Bin unconscious. John uses his drone and tries to overthrow and distract the cannibal. Then he knocks the drone off, it falls down and smashes into pieces. Just as the fireman climbs to the edge of the balcony, Yoon Bin regains her consciousness and cuts the fireman's hand off. As both parts running out of supplies to stay alive, John Woo decided to sneak out into other neighbor's apartment for food. In the hallway he finds the corpse of his dead neighbor and inspects his pockets to find the keys. He unlocks the apartment and gathers all the edible food, seeing his next-door neighbor's sibling is a hiker. He goes to the neighbor's room to take his climbing equipments and camping gears. Just as he was picking up the stuff, his infected neighbor starts attacking June. John fights back and manages to escape. He gets food, supplies, water and a pair of walkie-talkies. He sends some food and the walkie-talkie through the connection line to Yoon Bin. Through the walkie-talkies the two starts to build up conversations. Jun Woo thanks for saving his life, but Yoon Bin refused to take the credit, telling that he was saved by the desire he has within himself to live. Turned out Yoon Bin to attempt suicide but hesitated. Two connected with each other through the walkie-talkies. They learn each other's likings and passion. The pair even shares a meal together. Several days later, a throng of infected cannibals on the street start entering into the buildings in a hurry. Yoon Bin accidentally knocks over a shelf. A group converges at her door. But Jun Woo distracts them by calling the unit adjacent to hers with the apartment complex's phone system. The pair gear up to leave their apartment and meet in the 8th floor of Jun Woo's apartment, where there is no infected and the quietest. Yoon Bin rappels from balcony to the streets and fights off infected, making her way into the building. On her way she picks up a gun. Yoon Bin almost gets overrun by a cannibal, but Jun appears and saves her. They make their way to the 8th floor. An infected man sees them and summons other infected. Jun Woo and Yoon Bin fights in great effort. As the pair is about to be overtaken, an older man emerges from the last suite on the floor and rescues them from the infected cannibals. In the stranger's home, the pair accepts the old man's food and water. The man shares, Information's about a talk of rescue team that he heard over the radio. Yu Bin sees a picture of a couple and a child. She also sees infant milk bottles. She asked the man whereabouts of the baby, as the house shows no sign of a child living. But the man replies he doesn't have a child, and Jun-woo falls asleep from drugs in the food. Yu Bin realized that the man had drugged them. The old man drags Yu Bin to a room where he keeps his infected wife. He traps Yu Bin inside the room for her wife to feed on her. And thank Yu Bin and Jun-woo for coming by, as his wife had been starving for several days now. Just then Jun-woo wakes up and holds the man on gunpoint, threatens to kill him if he doesn't let Yu Bin go. But merciless old man let go of the rope holding his wife back. Jun-woo drops the gun and dives in, and catches the rope. Inside, Yu Bin screams while struggling to get away from the infected wife. While the man bargains with Jun-woo, saying he would let Jun-woo, if he lets his wife devour Yu Bin. Suddenly screaming in the room stopped, equally shocking the man and Jun-woo. The man pushes Jun-woo aside, and opens the door to check on his wife. She falls into him with Yu Bin, who saved herself by pulling a fabric over the infected wife's head. The man surrenders to his wife's attack, and Yu Bin shoots them both as his wife feeds on his neck. The gunshots attract more infected and they starts to running in horror to the building. As they lose hope in their fate, Yu Bin suggests to kill each other, as it gives them the privilege of dying as humans instead turning to these monsters. As Jun-woo hesitated to shoot, they hear a sound of a helicopter passing outside, which gives them hope about life once again. The pair rush to the rooftop while fighting the infected. A swamp of infected cannibals follows them to the rooftop. They barricaded the door, but was bust open by the cannibals. They were almost about to, overwhelmed by the infected. Just then a helicopter with armed soldiers shoot the crowd down. The two quickly get on the helicopter and they were carried to their safety. Jun-woo and Yu Bin phone get the reception back as they fly over. Just then Jun-woo receives a message from his family saying they are alive. A voiceover by an anchor explains that large part of the metropolitan area is affected by this illness. Similar to what Jun-woo did, a lot of survivors posted pictures and location on social media, and now the military is tracking these accounts to find and save these survivors.